All right, so looking at the external structures, you have the left and right hemisphere, you have gyri that come up, and you have sulci that go down. You can actually see on an internal cut, you can see how the sulci go down into it. So those would be sulci, and these would be gyri. This is the gray matter. You can see that it is gray, and the white matter is white because it is the myelin around the axon. So there are some major sulci. You have the central sulcus that runs right here. There's not always a dark line there because there's not always dried blood there. You have to kind of look for the groove. The central sulcus delineates the frontal lobe and the parietal lobe. Then between the parietal and occipital, there's the parieto-occipital lobe. This one is a little bit harder to see. There's not always dried blood to color it. So this would be the occipital lobe. And then finally, you have the lateral sulcus that runs this way between the parietal and temporal lobe. The three main parts are visible here really well. You have the cerebrum, which is divided into 4 lobes. You have the cerebellum, and then you have the brain stem. So when you open it up along the longitudinal fissure, this is the longitudinal fissure, this is the transverse fissure. Longitudinal, transverse. If you look in there, you can actually see the superior and inferior colliculi. These would be the superior colliculi, these would be the inferior colliculi, and then in there would be the pineal gland. So if we look at it from the side, this is a really great cut here made by Emily. We have this very white line here. This is the corpus callosum. This is what connects the left and right hemisphere. And then just below that is this hole. It is a little squished right now, but not normally. Normally it's open like this. This is the lateral ventricle, and it's full of fluids. So just inferior to that, you're going to find your thalamus. The thalamus is usually a round shape, although it might be a little squished because these have been compressed for a while. And below the thalamus is the hypothalamus. So the thalamus relays information to all the lobes of the cerebrum. The hypothalamus plays a role in temperature regulation. You can remember that because hypothermia. And moving over here, this is the pineal gland. It got sliced in half during the cut, which is what should have happened. It's perfect. The pineal gland produces hormones for sleep hormones. Here you have the superior colliculi and inferior colliculi. These are up against the cerebellum, and they play a role in connecting motor functions with the cerebrum because they're up against it. Below the inferior colliculi, you have the midbrain, you have the pons, and then you have the medulla oblongata. If you're not able to clearly see those, that's okay. Just make sure you know the correct order, and I'll make it very clear when I ask on the test for that. And these all are involuntary. They have to do with the primal things like blood pressure and heart rate, breathing, things like that. When you get over to the medulla, then you get into more of your, like the aggression and rage that, of course, got famous with the Waterboy movie. So in here you have the cerebellum, you see the arbor vitae, and these are storing the memories of our muscle, for muscle memory. The cerebellum in general is for motor movement and function. Now, if you do cut in past the pineal gland and past the colliculi in the temporal lobe, if you cut into the temporal lobe, you can expose the amygdala. And so I'll try and show a picture of that if someone's able to expose that really well. On the underside, some of the structures on the underside, that's what we have here. So this would be the optic chiasm. It was an X, but these two parts fell off, so now it's just a V, and that plays a role in vision. Up here would be the olfactory bulbs, which went down the nostril. That would be the right nostril, left nostril. The olfactory bulbs are connected to olfactory tracts, which come down and connect to the hippocampus. The hippocampus is long-term memory. Let's see if we can see the hippocampus here. It is between the pineal gland and the and the thalamus. So it would be that right there. It's kind of hard to see on this one, but it's essentially a bridge between the pineal gland and the thalamus. That's the hippocampus, long-term memory, connected to your olfactory, which is smell. Some other things that you'll need to know down here is this is where the pituitary gland was. It's not visible because it was removed when they processed the brain. But the pituitary is what makes, it's the master gland. It makes all the hormones that control the body, including growth hormones, reproductive hormones, and the hormones for your metabolism that we will talk about later in the semester. And then, of course, this is your brain stem. And let's see, some little oculomotor nerves all along here. This is the mammillary body, which you don't need to know. I think those are all the structures that you need to know.